So I think I'll just start in giving you a little bit of a backstory on this, because actually it was my writing about the Henry Deacon story that in fact brought about the collaboration with Project Camelot in the first place. Just to recap very briefly what the original story was with Daniel, I have a large background in the UFO field. I've been researching it for many years, and I also have had what appear to be contacts with my own source, so to speak. And during that time, I was able to make the acquaintance with someone who told me that he had worked on the Montauk Project. Now, you got to understand, this is probably the most controversial. What can you think of that's more controversial than Montauk? I
mean, my experience of Montauk, my personal experience of Montauk, was exactly the same as you described in your first interview with us.
It's totally ridiculous.
I thought it was nonsense. I wouldn't even read the books. I know that you picked up the book to read as entertainment. I wouldn't even
read the first one.
And just as you encountered Daniel, and he started saying, "Listen up here, this is real," and I was there. I had exactly the same experience with Henry, because in our first interview with Henry, Montauk occurred in the conversation. I can't remember exactly how, and he said, "Yeah, sure, that was real. It's a 40-year time loop. Al Bielek says some weird things sometimes, but basically the whole thing is true." And at that point, I started to pay very, very close attention.
Some people might not know the basis of Montauk. Why don't you, just so that we keep everybody in the conversation?
Oof. After you.
Okay. Bottom line, the seat inside a UFO is more than just a seat. It's an interface with your consciousness. Now remember, if even one UFO sighting is real, then we're not alone in the cosmos. If even one disk is actually a saucer, it's not built by us, but built by somebody else, then you have to have a warp technology, because we've seen disks that have disappeared in the sky. So here's the idea. You're in this chair. You focus your mind on a particular place you want to go. It opens up a wormhole in front of the saucer. You fly through the wormhole and you end up going where you want to go. So the testimony that I heard from this man who calls himself Daniel, it's not his real name, has never been duplicated. So I've had some people email me and say, "Oh, well, I've heard everything that you said before." Well, we only covered the part of Daniel's testimony in our last interview that was already the same as what was in the Montauk books. I've heard other stuff that was not in the Montauk books. And your Henry Deacon has all this stuff that's not anywhere, but then I'm reading your website with his testimony and I'm going, "Oh my God, this is the same stuff that my guy Daniel was saying to me." Now, and it's ridiculously specific information, much too specific to have been just a chance overlap. So what you start realizing is we're talking about a unified construct here. So Montauk is basically a reverse engineering of a ship, of a seat from a UFO, so that human beings are trained to run the chair with their mind, open up a vortex, send people through. Some people might make it, some people might not. And then eventually trying to basically stabilize this so that it's a usable technology. That's the basis of Montauk. It sounds very far out. But you have to understand, like Philadelphia experiment, if that's true, it's probably only the first time that that was done. And it was perfected over the course of years afterwards. So,
yeah. I had the fascinating experience of sitting down with Henry personally and showing him the video of you talking about...
Oh, really? I didn't know that. You didn't know that.
We sat together, we watched this video, and it's like, okay, and this is like the reverse corroboration here. This is like finding out from Henry whether what Daniel was saying through you was accurate or not. And he watched the whole thing, at least that whole section. He just nodded, and what was really interesting was he couldn't remember your name. He kept calling you the blonde guy.
The blonde guy.
So he said, what that blonde guy was saying, what the blonde guy was saying was absolutely correct.
Really?
He said. But he said,
not surprised.
with one small variation, and this is just one of these lovely little touches. And it's
I haven't heard any of
this. It's like, you know this is real. He said, what did he say it was? He said, he said they're not called stargates.
Jump gates.
No. He said that jump rooms He said they're jump rooms. And I started to pay very close attention, because this is the kind of, it's like, it's not, but then afterwards I realized that you'd said it was called jump gate technology. But I was talking with Henry, and I was talking about jump gates, so I changed it a little bit with my own memory, and he said, no, they're jump rooms. And
Daniel didn't know what, I mean, I don't know if he had the word jump gate from them or not, but basically, in case you're not following this, a jump gate is allegedly a stable, traversable wormhole between two locations, which works whenever you want to go. I'd heard that it was probably called jump gate. Daniel wasn't sure. So now you're saying that it was actually called jump room.
It's called a jump room. And I'll tell you what a jump room is. And maybe you can get it as I'm describing it.
Okay.
Just as Henry started to describe it, and I got it immediately. And he said, and I said, what, you mean like an elevator? And he said, that's exactly what it's like. He said, there's a room like an elevator. You go in the doors close behind you. Then the doors open, and you're there. He said, it takes no time. You feel a bit weird. He said, but you go, you're in Europe or England or the UK or underground somewhere. He said there are a few of these things in different places. They're jump rooms. You go into the jump room, next thing you know, you're on Mars. You can go there for lunch. You can come back. It takes no time. The personnel get there that way. The heavy equipment has to be taken with these large advanced spacecraft they've got.
Okay, so I'm hearing people laughing, okay? It really is a good idea to have watched the first video before you watch this one, because base on Mars, jump gate, jump room, oh my God. And I get that, and you have to understand now, there are a variety of witnesses out there, and their testimony is so explosive, and it is so beyond what you think you know is true, that we can have this discussion, because we've spoken to, between the two of us, we've probably spoken to 30 of these guys. They're real. And you can tell they're real because they're freaked out sometimes talking to you. I mean...
Yeah. It's such a huge story that ever since spending a few days with Henry very recently, I went back to my the emails I was getting on my computer and reading the stuff you get on the forums and on blog, and I was thinking, you know what, these guys they really don't know what's happening. The powers that be really don't have much to worry about, because most people really, really don't know. There's not one colony on Mars. There are several.
I didn't know that.
This one we've been talking about here is just the largest one. One of the things that Henry told us was he was reluctant to talk about the so-called secret space program, the alternative space program.
Oh.
He actually he's worried that if we go doing the unthinkable and start congressional inquiries and real investigations as to where the trillions of dollars have gone and what these scientists are doing in all these bases that don't exist and so on and so forth, somehow the whole thing might be frozen. And he said, this must not happen. He said, it's very, very important. You don't understand. He kept on saying, you don't understand. You don't understand. This is very, very important, and the future of the human race might depend on it. This must not be stopped. This is why it's important.
Okay. What did he say about Total Recall? I mean, there you got a movie, Arnold Schwarzenegger, he's in the chair's like the Montauk chair. Base on Mars, right? What's the deal there?
I actually, to be quite honest, I've had so many conversations with Henry, I cannot remember whether he referenced Total Recall. Did he reference Total Recall, Carrie?
No, I don't think so. I mean, we might have mentioned it in passing, but I don't recall anything really specific that he said about that movie.
But it sounds like Daniel may have
Now, we
mentioned
do
it.
have some information about 2001, The Space Odyssey, and
that's-
the...
my God, that's a whole different thing.
Yeah.
Well, but let me just close out the
right.
Total Recall as far as what I know, because we can jump intuitively very quickly here.
Sure.
Okay.
Daniel pointed out to me something that is sort of snuck into Total Recall that you don't really notice if you're not paying attention. But at the end of the movie, obviously if you've seen it, you know that there's an alien system that they find there, and Schwarzenegger himself actually puts his hand on this thing that fires off some sort of gigantic technology that puts these heat rods into the ice cap on the southern and northern pole, I would imagine, melting the ice back into atmosphere, which in turn basically makes the air of Mars breathable so that it's like a colonizable place. What you see at the end of the movie is that there's a mountain where the atmosphere blows out the top, and it's exactly in the shape of a pyramid. And they never talk about it, it just kind of happens. One of the things that Daniel said, now let me just give a background on Daniel so that we have context for our conversation. Daniel claims that he was a highly technical person, had a big background in technology, got involved in this project, got recruited out of the Air Force, that he worked as a guard, but he also had other responsibilities, that this project was basically financed by German Nazis who had, since World War II, relocated to the southern tip of Brazil, that they had funded themselves from gold that was in a train. All this is in the Montauk books. But he worked there, and he gave a lot of specific information about it. So the point being that when he saw Total Recall, he had memories of them discussing with him that Mars had been civilized, that there were people like us on Mars in the distant past, that this planet was loaded with artifacts, that there's all over the place are there artifacts, that there's pyramids there, there's the face, and there's all sorts of things you can discover there. And one of the things I said in the other video is that he had a photograph of two astronauts, or I don't remember how many astronauts it was, but that they're waving at the camera next to a gigantic pyramid, showing that they were there. It also appears that Alternative 3, although it's loaded with potential misinformation, that Alternative 3 is kind of in the right vein, but apparently the actual film itself is a hoax, but the actual fact that they went there and that they found some degree of life still on the surface of the planet was the Law of One series makes it clear, this is 1981, that our galaxy has a personality in and of itself. It's like a super creator, so to speak. They call it the Logos, and they say that it has designed the human body as the form in which intelligent life will take on any given planet in the galaxy. Well, you were just telling me before we started filming, what was Henry Deacon saying about ETs at this Mars base? That they're all...
Oh, yeah. It might just need to remind me on the specific, but
everybody's human.
Everyone's humanoid. Going back to this comment about the ETs on the Mars base, because he was there, speaking from his experience, had a population of 670,000.
That's amazing.
And I, yeah, I mean, what? 670,000? I said to him, are these all human? And he said, in his characteristically Delphic way, he said, it depends what you mean by human. And the picture that Henry has always painted for us is that there is such a complexity of interrelationship in every way one can imagine in any kind of a drama between all these different visitors, all these different agendas. You've got benevolent guys, you've got malevolent guys, you've got people who are just observing. Every system, and there are many, many, many systems, hundreds, thousands of systems, everyone's humanoid. This is the template.
That's incredible.
This is the template.
All right, but
anyway,
I'm hearing the audience, just the obvious questions. I know you probably have millions of questions, and this sounds completely sci-fi, so if you can't accept it, just come along with us for the ride. Take it all in as just sort of something to be fascinated by. But, all right. A base on Mars. Where did it come from? How did it get there? Why are they doing it? What the heck is the point? Why do we need a jump room to get there?
It's been there for tens of thousands of years.
Tens of thousands of years.
Or longer.
It's under the ground?
It's under the ground. It's at the bottom of an ancient seabed.
Oh.
And that intrigued me, because while Henry didn't specifically say so, the implication was it was established when there was a sea.
Oh,
Mars has experienced a number of catastrophes, both man-made and natural. The solar system itself has been through a number of cataclysmic cycles as it kind of journeys through the stormy waters of the Milky Way.
I'm sorry. Did he ever mention the Gore report? I don't know if you guys have heard of this, but Rush Limbaugh happened to go on the radio one day and talk about this thing that he read called the Gore report. And I have the recording of him doing this, and the transcript, in which he said that Mars had once been civilized with life like ours, that they found giant remains of bodies in big piles like Pompeii, that they were all basically flame-broiled bodies, and that they had done DNA tests and had discovered that some of the Mars DNA that they found there correlated with people in the Skull and Bones Society. And he said this on his radio program. This is not a joke. But then as soon as he did it, it was sanitized. Transcript disappeared from his website, but even to this day, I have a link that will take you to Rush's website where you can download him actually saying this on MP3.
Amazing.
So he didn't say anything like that?
Okay. Give us the link so that
we'll do that.
When we publish the transcript, we'll make sure that people have access to that.
Henry Deacon told us that he really relates to Boriska, who is the indigo child in Russia that we just interviewed, who has come forward with conscious knowledge of a prior life on Mars. And they basically said that there was a cataclysm, Boriska said, on Mars that destroyed it, and that and then this correlates with Dan Burish, because Dan Burish has been talking in sort of cryptic terms about the face on Mars and his investigations into that, and basically saying that the face on Mars and the civilization that was there is us in the future, and that we are actually looking at ourselves in the future when we're looking at the face on Mars.
Yeah. I asked Henry
pretty trippy.
I asked Henry about that, and he said that he knew nothing about that, because when he was there in present time. I was asking him whether he time traveled. I said, did you go to Mars in the future? What did you do? He said, no. He said, as far as any travel is concerned, it was in present time.
And we said, what did you do on Mars? And he said, I played a lot of ping pong.
Yeah. Well,
that's what he said.
I asked him more about that. Basically, he was doing exactly the same kind of job as he was in his installation on good old planet Earth. He was there as a technical specialist in that particular job to manage and monitor certain items of equipment. He did not get to explore barely anything. He was not on the surface. He wished he had been on the surface. He got to see out every now and then. There were little windows and things. The thing that actually triggered this entire conversation was when he was in the room that I was in at the time, and there was a beautiful big photograph of the Grand Canyon. And he was just kind of staring at this picture of the Grand Canyon, with this kind of slightly glazed look on his eyes. And he said to me, you know what that reminds me of, don't you?
Yeah.
Yeah. And it's a red rock. And I mean, of course, I immediately knew what he was talking about. I said, Mars, wasn't it? And he said, yeah. And
there's a place on Mars called Valles
story.
Marineris, which is a big, big canyon.
Tell the story about what he said about the guy who recruited him and how they would sit.
Oh, well, yes, this is... Yeah. At one point in Henry's career, he was recruited into NOAA, as we were just saying, the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Association, or say a project within NOAA, because there's so much compartmentalization in all of these agencies. And the guy who recruited him was somebody who had also been there on Mars. And there's something about these, my words, not his, the Mars veterans. There's something that is traumatic about their experience that Henry could not elaborate on. He told me that these two highly qualified, very sane, very brilliant scientists working in these classical organizations, they would close the door of this guy's office and they would weep together because of what they had experienced together. And I said, "What did you experience? What was this?" He couldn't tell me. I said, "Well, look, it sounds like fun. You go to a jump gate, you go to Mars for lunch, you play around with some equipment, which is all that you were doing on planet Earth anyway.
Ping pong with an ET.
Ping pong with an ET, and the ping pong is easier because the gravity is lighter. And then you come back. I mean, that sounds like fun." And he couldn't say. And every time I said, "But what's the problem?" he became anguished, but he couldn't say. And it wasn't that he wouldn't say, he couldn't say. It seemed to me that there's something there that either he could not remember or he would not remember or he was not being permitted to remember. This is my guess. I don't know if there's anyone out there who has been part of this. Then for goodness sake, contact either David or ourselves. At the moment, we're just really guessing because we don't know.
Okay, but why would we need a Mars base? I mean, what's the point?
I asked him what the function...
Is it like for an evacuation if the Earth gets in trouble? Or?
Yes, it's one of the functions. This is why Henry was adamant that he did not want anything to happen that would prejudice the continuation of the secret space program, because he said, we're on a ship and the ship might sink. These are our lifeboats. Don't go wrecking the lifeboat
That's like
systems.
the alternative 3 thing.
This is the alternative 3 thing, exactly. This is
the idea being, that certain people basically get out of here.
And certain people. Let me tell you more. These people have been chosen. There's a cadre, a group of very bright, very qualified, very highly able young representatives of the human race have already been singled out and trained to be the ones that will survive if we on planet Earth go to hell in a bucket in some way that is beyond our control. The ones that will
Well, it's
go
like
off
the
in
doomsday seed bank thing too, right?
Absolutely, really, These guys have already been earmarked. The whole thing is just like a science fiction story. Let me tell you more before we get thrown out of the restaurant here. I've got incredible...
You always hang it right over the edge here.
Back to what he was saying about, or back to what I was asking him about the catastrophe, or the catastrophes that have befallen Mars that make it look like a kind of rocky wasteland.
Right.
I said, well, there's something here that we can learn as a planet about. It's like, look what's happened to that planet there. We've got to take care of this. He said, the Earth has been protected, The Earth has been protected. And I said, how do you mean being protected? He said, well, he said in ancient times there was a protection put around the Earth to protect its extraordinary diversity, this extraordinary biosphere, this amazing, some people call it a zoo, this incredible life on this planet. And I said, well, what form does this take? He said, it's the Van Allen belts.
Van Allen belts.
The Van Allen belts. They're not a natural phenomenon. They're put there by...
It's the radiation blanket around the Earth that keeps cosmic rays from causing us to have skin cancer as much as we, a lot worse than we do now if they weren't there. We wouldn't be able to live here if it wasn't for the Van Allen belts. I
said, were they put there by our ancestors or our creators? And he said both. And then I said, now that reminds me, tell me something here, because I'm really curious. It's a question we'd never asked him. Because a lot of the people, Bart Sibro and other people, have legitimately questioned whether the Apollo missions made it to the moon by saying that, look, they couldn't have made it through the Van Allen belts. It's like going into a nuclear reactor and out the other side. You can't do that with that kind of technology. How did this happen? How did this happen? You couldn't have done it. They couldn't have gone to the moon. This is a load of nonsense. And so I said to Henry, look, this is a crazy question. Did we make it to the moon? And there was the longest silence. And eventually he said, yes. But it's not quite as simple as that.
Oh, Christ.
And I was thinking everything that you're thinking right now. This is a live conversation, guys, okay? He said, yeah. He said, but we went there with help. We went there with help. He said...
Every Apollo mission
yeah.
had UFO sightings surrounding the ship. Every single one that's been documented. And the fact is that almost all the Apollo astronauts were Freemasons.
He said that there's a non-human engineered ultra-lightweight nanoshield built into the Apollo capsules that protected them from the radiation. Because some people have been saying, look, you couldn't get through that stuff without 2 feet of lead, and the thing couldn't have moved, They had that technological help, and they had another kind of assistance.
I may have told you this before, but one of the things that Daniel told me was that there's a little box from Monsanto. It's about this big. You can run your whole house on it and it never runs out. It's free energy. They had that in the 60s, that they put it on the Apollo mission, on some of the landers and so forth, secretly snuck it in as something else, and that it was used, for a source of power when they needed it.
Yeah. Yes. And they had something like that worked as a sort of radiation deflector. Like it deflected stuff as well. They had these 2 devices. They had a shield and they had a deflector. And they also had something, and he wasn't specific about it. He said that enabled the LEM to land, the lunar module, to land and to take off. He said to me, what do you notice about the LEM as it took off? And I said, no blast
Daniel
crater.
said exactly the same thing.
No blast crater.
As I mentioned recently, ladies and gentlemen, after reviewing data from one of the Mars rovers, NASA, big press conference the other day, concluded that Mars was once drenched with enough water to support life in a good, habitable environment. And despite, this is an incredible discovery, and NASA still had to go out there and say that there's no proof that life existed. All they said was that conditions were there for there to be life. But this is not all NASA said, ladies and gentlemen. There's a lot that is not being discussed here. As a powerful, influential member of the media, I know more than you do, especially about this. I have seen a highly classified report that has not been released publicly, and it probably won't be unless you consider my talking about it here to be releasing it publicly. It's top secret report, codenamed the Gore Report. It was prepared by scientists from Area 52 in New Mexico. They analyzed the Mars data, And there are some findings in this report, and I can understand why they don't want to release this, but I want to, and I don't know it all, but I want to pass off what some of the Gore report says. There was life on Mars. That's what NASA is not being upfront about. There was life up there. Everybody knows it. We can't be the only people occupying the universe. It's impossible. Who do we think we are? We're the only people God created? Sorry, for those of you who don't believe in God, only people who evolved from apes? So it's clear that there was life elsewhere, and now that NASA's kind of let the cat out of the bag, if there were habitable conditions up there, we know there was life there. In fact, they found some DNA evidence up there that compares favorably to members of the Skull and Bones Society here on Earth. These people were highly industrialized, the Martians. They were technologically superior, and they were very arrogant people. And they thought that the power and the force of their existence was all that was needed to sustain them. And they didn't care a whit about conservation. They didn't care a whit about preserving anything. They got rid of everything that was pristine. In fact, they used the internal combustion engine. They were globalists. They got rid of all the countries on that planet, and they had just one giant society, and the powerful, rich just absorbed everything they needed from the best parts of the planet, used it for themselves, and everybody basically suffered until everybody died out, because what happened was there were no checks and balances. Probably, I don't know this, there probably wasn't any campaign finance reform to restrict the corruption in their elective circumstances there. And so special interest groups and multinationals who escape taxes by forming offshore accounts. There's no coincidence in the fact that they found water, lots of water, where the habitable conditions were, because it dovetails with what's in the report about some of these multinationals abandoning their own countries and locating offshore for all of the nefarious reasons. They had rainforests. You're not hearing about this. They had ancient rainforests. They had jungles. They had so much oil and gas. They had reserves out the wazoo. In fact, one of the things they found on Mars is that there are still, it's possible that there's still some there, tiny little amounts. But it's clear. I mean, you saw the pictures from Mars. I saw the skeletons. At least I saw the fossils of the skeletons. There were people there, or there were beings there. But it looked like Pompeii. It looked like these people all died huddled together, and they were just swarmed in an instant. They were one day there and then gone. So many people living close together, it has to have been the result of urban sprawl. Nobody had any space, nobody had any room, and you could tell it. I saw it from the pictures that they released. It's clear, ladies and gentlemen, Mars was once it was once the jewel of the solar system, and it was raped. Mars was raped. This is what NASA knows. This is what the Gore report says. Mars was raped by robber barons. Capitalism, dependence on combustible engines led to global warming. The ecosystem that sustained everybody was destroyed. That's why the water they found is at the equator area. The ice caps melted. Exactly what's happening here, folks. Exactly what's happening here. These people were advanced. Not everybody on Mars died. This is what's fascinating about this report. Not everybody on Mars died. Some were able to flee. Some were able to get off the planet. This is what they can't afford to release. UFOs, yep. All these sightings, all of these blinking lights, all these unexplained things, they're real. That's why they're calling this Area 52. Those are Martians escaping the destruction. I think it goes way back, before we were alive. These UFOs have been happening all over. It may well be that the bright star that guided the three wise men was a UFO. Tax cuts absolutely were a factor. That's what the offshore thing was all about. Yeah, of course tax cuts were a factor. But the elites got off. The elites were able to travel in space. The elite, there weren't very many of them, but they were able to get off. They fled the planet in time. The stunning thing about the Mars report, the Gore report, is that they're here. These people that destroyed Mars are here. They are on Earth, folks. They are in America. They work at Halliburton. They worked at Enron. They worked at WorldCom. They're at Boeing. They came to America, my friends. And the Gore report clearly illustrates they have not learned a thing from their experiences on Mars. The truth is out there. Far, far out there.